Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Welcome to the second workshop for Play Economics. This is Alberto from the Play Economics team, Associate Professor at University of New South Wales. Let me just start by saying that if you have any question on things like how should I download the game, how can I access the tutorials in the ebook, how can I check my leaderboards in the ebook, how do I change the resolution to make sure that my computer performs well enough with the game, well, please check back on the previous workshop that I did a couple of weeks ago. It's in the same YouTube channel, also in the same section of your ebook. So have a look at that if you want to know everything in terms of how to get started with the game. Today we are going to focus more on any potential question that you may have, given that we are now into the assessment period. Hence, this could be a good occasion, I thought, to touch base and make sure that I tackle all the questions that you may have. If there is no question, I will instead focus on showing you a couple of the new scenarios that we made so that I can give you a few more tips regarding that as well. But remember, if you need to do anything about how to make marks and all the details about all the housekeeping around this assessment, please check the first workshop because all the information is already there. Well, without further ado, I'm just gonna skip to the small camera and show you this page that at this point you should be familiar with. This contains all the scenarios that you need for your course, and some of them are gonna be single player scenarios with leaderboards and some other are gonna be tournaments, and I'm gonna in fact give a quick look at both types of scenarios during this workshop. As you can see here, I have a lot of courses at my end, but what we are gonna be focusing on are the two courses, one at UNSW at UQ, which both have elements of microeconomics and macroeconomics, and we are going to see how the two extra scenarios that we added, three actually extra scenarios that we added, tackle those kind of issues. Now, let me just also mention that we are now in the assessment period, as this log message is gonna tell you. At this point, the assessment period is going to finish on the 5th of September at 3. Sorry, it's started on the 5th of September and it's going to end on October 4th at 17 Sydney time. There is plenty of time, absolutely plenty of time to go through the scenarios, so take it easy. And as I always say, if you have any issue, if you have any problem with the game, for anything really, playing the game or performance, please let us know. Send an email to support@lionsartstudios.com and we're gonna get back to you in a second. Very well, having done this, let me just jump into chapter 11. This one is interesting because, again, like chapter 9 before it, which is a scenario that I presented in the previous workshop, chapter 11 and in fact even chapter 10 are very similar to that, but we increase the complexity a little bit, and I'm going to show how that works in a second. Of course, up to this point, if you had a look at the previous workshop and play the game, you will see that what we are trying to do in the previous scenarios is give you an idea on how to create this automation or bots that are gonna to perform tasks for you. For example, a consumer bot that needs to decide what goods to purchase and recursively go through this choice. For example, should I purchase an apple or a banana? And then after making that choice, asking again, well, should I now buy an extra apple or an extra banana, until their budget is consumed. This is an example of a bot that will essentially try to spend your budget with the objective of getting the most happiness out of consumption as possible. Then there are entrepreneurs that are gonna set both the type of goods that they want to produce, but also how many units to produce, the typical questions that we've seen in the demand and supply chapter, where we were looking into the cost-benefit principle decisions around optimizing happiness or maximizing profit using economic concepts. The objective here was to ease you into the creation of these algorithms or bots to create potential behavior in the economy. For example, a consumer that responds to prices of goods by increasing consumption or decreasing consumption depending on the change in price, an entrepreneur that decides to enter a market, or an entrepreneur that decides to expand production based on some changes in the prices of the outputs or the price of the inputs of production. That's basically the frame of what educationally we are trying to do with the game. And in this particular level, you are actually impersonating the entrepreneur here, the mayor, the president here, which is a character that has special powers. They can make policies. So if I open this menu here, up here, you can see that I have a view of the market, and in fact I also have a plus and minus buttons here, suggesting that this particular president of this particular economy is trying to decide what are the optimal prices for the economy. So it's a situation where there is full control from the president in terms of the market. This president is very micromanaging in a sense and wants to set the price for all goods. We know that in reality governments can do that using price ceiling and price floor. So this is not exactly a crazy assumption in the model, but of course this particular president may be a bit over controlling in the sense that it's trying to really fine-tuning all the prices. And previously I have mentioned how sort of the magic of economics kind of comes from the fact that when you let the market get to the point where demand equals supply, that tends to be the situation that maximizes the total happiness or total welfare in the economy, which is a measure that we show up here in this UI as well. So this UI also show you the expected utils, if you want, that are going to be achieved by the consumers in the economy given the current market conditions that are presented in that UI. Now, the interesting part of this scenario is that the government can now control the prices of blueberry, red berries, and wages. Essentially, the president here can control all the prices in the economy. The assumption here coming from how these agents, artificial agents, are enjoying red berries and blueberries is that they are substitutes consumption. So you know it's like Coke and Pepsi. If the price of one goes up, the consumption of the other, the amount consumed of the other should go up as well, like as per the definition of substitutes. Hence, we are gonna take a look at how in this type of simulation, a change in one price affects everything else. And I want to analyze this 1 second because it really encapsulates almost everything that can be said about the market analysis that we do in these introductory courses in economics, and how things that on paper, on your ebook, may seem pretty simple and straightforward can actually get pretty complex if you look at the model in its reality, if you really look at all the interactions among markets that can happen. I think I also spent too much time talking, so I'm going to restart the level because I ended up getting to a point where the market was closed. As you can see here, if I open this UI, oops, no, that's not. Let me go back to this. So if I open this UI, here you can see that we have the time that it's going to take until the market closes. So this is the time that you have until these prices are going to be locked and producers and consumers are going to go about implementing their consumption and production decision. So you have time you have this amount of time available to make the decision in terms of how to allocate prices. It's a generous amount of time. You can also press the skip button if you instead want to switch directly to the phase in the day where the market is now locked and production continues. So when you're done changing the prices here, you can skip at will. Fantastic. Very good. So if I restart time here, I just want to give you an example of what happens when I reduce the price of Blueberry. And to have the real view of the full analysis in terms of how the video game works, let me actually press on the Blueberry here. So I pressed here. The first thing you're going to see is this like checkbox or toggle UI, where you can, for example, toggle and have a look at the recipe, which show what do you need to produce red berries. And for example, to produce 1 red berry or 2 red berries, and it tells you the output, where to find them, and things like that. But I'm going to hide that because I don't especially care at this moment. We have government policies where it's possible to introduce taxes and subsidies, but this is also not something that this particular scenario wants to focus on. Instead, I would like to suggest that we open the breakdown and the supply and demand graph. So the breakdown itself is very, very helpful because it shows all the individual consumers in the economy. So it gives you a really granular view on who is making the decisions in this economy for this particular market of blueberries. So in this market for blueberries, we have 3 consumers and 1 producer. And these are bots that have been created in the game using the same systems, the same decision-making algorithm that you have used in the previous scenarios to build your own bots. At this point, what I'm trying to say is that at this point, you should understand how, roughly speaking, this is done in terms of creating these little decision makers, these little buyers, and also what is the optimal way to do it, because in those scenarios you were trying to maximize the happiness and profit of these agents. So you should have had a sense of how to solve that type of cost-benefit principle problem. Now, this is them, and this is the supply and demand graph, which tracks as you change the price of the item, it tracks how much is demanded and how much is supplied of that particular good. Hence, if I, for example, reduce the price of blueberries, what's happening here, and this is like a behavioral, we call an economic response of these agents to a decrease in the price of blueberries. So it went from $12 to $11. What's happening, as you can see right here, is that these bots, thanks God, are responding to a decrease in price of blueberries in a way that goes perfectly well with the law of demand. They are in fact increasing the quantity of blueberries that they are asking to consume. And of course, if you sum up this increase across all of them, you get this aggregate increase, which is essentially how we build the aggregate demand curve in an economy, which is pointing you to see that a decrease of $1 in the price of blueberry has determined an increase in demand by 3 units. And this is what we have already seen in the previous scenario as well that I presented in the previous workshop, but here there is an extra element which is important. Here you can see that red berries, that technically it's a market that have nothing to do with blueberries, but the red berries also seem to have undergone some changes after the decrease in price of blueberries. And in fact, you can see that the quantity demanded of red berries, if I switch quickly, has actually gone down because one of these agents, Orlando, has decided to consume less red berries. And that makes perfect sense economically because red berries and blueberries are substitutes. So going back to the blueberries UI, if I decrease the price of blueberries and I increase the consumption, something has to give because with a fixed budget, there is no other way to achieve an increase in consumption. So the agents are basically deciding to consume more of blueberries that are relatively cheaper and less red berries. This is what we call in economics, it's very important, it's called the substitution effect. When the price of something goes down, the price of substitutes become relatively higher relative to before the change in price, and that drives this increase in the relative price, drives consumers to demand less of that good. And that's exactly what we see here. If I continue to decrease this, the price of a blueberry, I see a further increase in demand of blueberry and a further decrease in demand of red berries. It's important to see all of this happening at once because this is really the core analysis of the markets that we do in this course. Now, if I decrease even further the price of blueberries, so I click the plus even further here, something interesting is happening at this point. You see that not only the demand of blueberry goes up, but also the demand for labor goes down. And this is due to the fact that suppliers are now, given that the price has decreased, you remember when you were trying to optimize the decision of an entrepreneur, it was really important to look at the price of the output of production. And of course, if the price of output goes down, when you try to set production at the point where marginal cost equal marginal revenue, quantity tends to decrease when the price of the output of production decreases. And you can see here that in fact this is happening. Supply is going down. An interesting thing that's happening in this level is that when supply goes down, and really showcase how important macroeconomics is, meaning looking at the general equilibrium of the economy, when the supply goes down, so goes down demand for labor, because firms are now producing less, 1 unit less, and they require less units of labor to do that. And so far so good. It's not too difficult to kind of imagine something like that. The price of blueberries goes down, then there is less production, and that entails that less workers are going to be hired. But interestingly, and I'm insisting on this general equilibrium idea where the economy, every change in the economy affects every other part of the economy, which is something that, frankly, when you look at the microeconomics part of the course, we're not going to really focus much on it because we look at market by market. But if you see them all together, you can start seeing some interesting flow-on effects that could be quite important. If, in fact, the salaries are, so the amount of workers that are going to get hired is going down, that will also determine a change in the income of these consumers. Because remember, these workers are earning a wage that these consumers are spending. Hence, you can see how the economy gets complex here. You reduce the price of a good, that's good for consumers because demand goes up, but reduces the quantity that producers want to sell, that reduces demand for labor, and that might actually reduce the budget that consumers have. So the income effect might even end up reducing the quantity of blueberries demanded if the reduction in labor demand is large enough. As I continue to do this, you're going to see that there is the substitution effect that's in full force here. The law of supply is also upholding. You can see that the graph is beginning to show here. We have a supply that's pretty inelastic for labor and a more elastic supply demand for, sorry, I should say, apologies. This is supply for blueberries, and this is demand for blueberries. So if I continue to do this, you can see how the demand and supply graph is created. In this particular scenario, you can also change directly the wage that the workers are obtaining from their work. you can see that there is a lot of supply and not much demand for labor. So it would be probably a good idea for the mayor to reduce the wage so that we can balance demand and supply. And what happens when I reduce the wage like this? You're going to see that there are going to be changes. So focus on this UI in this case, which indicates how the worker bot is trading off leisure and work. The decision that we've seen in the previous scenario, which is typically content that fits very well the macroeconomics part of this course, where we look at labor markets essentially. The decision between leisure and labor is one between working and hence being able to purchasing one of these goods. If you hover over, you're gonna get all the additional information that you need, just like I'm doing now. So working allows me to purchase these goods, and that gives me happiness. And of course, the alternative would be to instead just to relax, and that also gives me happiness, which is this leisure component of the day. So this basically breakdown says that for the first worker here, that this particular team of consumers have, they are gonna spend the first few hours of the day collecting, working, and then in view of actually consuming these goods, and then taking a little bit of leisure here. If I change the wage, for example, I increase the wage, that will typically change this decision-making process, because if the wage is higher, the opportunity cost of leisure goes up. So you get a really good wage now that has increased relative to before, and this means that every hour of leisure that you take is now going to cost you more in terms of foregone salary. And of course, ultimately, which is what we show here, foregone utility from the consumption good that you could have bought with your salary. And so when you increase the wage, the opportunity cost of leisure goes up, and that, generally speaking, makes you desire to do less leisure and instead work more. And the opposite happens if you reduce the price. But even in this case, it's not that simple, because when you, for example, increase the wage, there is definitely an increase in the opportunity cost of leisure, which is the classic substitution effect. Leisure, now that the wage has gone up, has become relatively more expensive in terms of its opportunity cost. But there is also an income effect, because when you increase your wage, you become richer. And the income effect, as you know, for a normal good, so assuming that leisure is a normal good, which is to say, when you get richer and richer, you want to get more leisure time, which I think it's a realistic assumption for many people. Leisure is a normal good. In that case, when the wage goes up, yes, the cost of leisure increases because of the foregone higher salary, but also simultaneously, you can see how the income effect is pushing on the other direction. Now that you are richer, you would want to do more leisure. So two conflicting effects. And if, as you increase the wage, there may be a point where the wage is high enough and the income effect is strong enough that increasing the wage might have no effect on the amount of leisure, or might even increase leisure. I am spending a little bit of time here. I'm a bit of geek when it comes to economics, but I think it's important to flesh out all these mechanisms all at the same time. And this is what this capstone scenario is doing. It's showing you how all of these things that you have studied are really interacting with each other, how a price can affect all the other markets through substitution and income effects, and how total welfare in surplus in an economy, the total amount of utility achieved in an economy, which is captured by this part of the table, can be affected by all these macroeconomic changes. So this is a general equilibrium model, fully fleshed out for you. based on the type of automation and algorithm building that you have seen in the previous scenarios. I could admittedly go on talking a lot about this and the economics behind it, but I don't really want to bore you because you already have your ebook and your lectures to dive into these details. But I did want to just give you a good look at this part of the game and try to explain also why we have designed it this way. Going back to the main menu, I want finally to showcase this last one, which is also a new addition relative to the practice period. This is chapter 12, and this is, as you can see up here, this gives you point if you play it in single player, but also gives you point if you play it in scenario modes. And just want to point out that the points that you get, that you see here, for example, may change course by course, depending on the course. So 2 modes to play this level. You have already seen something like this when in the previous workshop we were tackling consumption and how to make a consumption decision, and you would compare yourself with other students that were playing that tournament. What do we have here? Well, this is in many ways the capstone experience for the Playconomics software, at least at this point, where we ask you to control both your consumer and your entrepreneur at the same time. And what we ask you to do is to actually create automation for them in order to make decisions regarding consumption and production. And at the same time, you also have other students bots here that have been created, in this case by Morgan, who is doing really well. So everyone who creates a competitive bot in a tournament is gonna be used then, so their bots are gonna be then used in future tournaments. In this particular case, in fact, I am playing against the bots created by Morgan. I think he did so well because we randomly select the students that we have picked Morgan's ideas and automations multiple times. If you want to have a more precise understanding of what's going on in this tournament, the thing that I do every time is just to zoom out until you get to this cloud little animation, and then keep on zooming out until you get to this point here. This is a great view because it shows you all the players that you are playing against in this tournament. You can see that there are a few of them. You can see that these are this is my productive location. This is the productive location of Morgan. And because we picked more than one of Morgan's ideas, he has been doing so well. There are a few Morgans here that are being used in the economy as bots. And the next thing that I would do immediately after would be to click the leaderboard toggle here, which shows you in this session who I'm playing against, and also in real time it's gonna show me how I'm doing in terms of total happiness, and also the agents that I'm playing against are doing. And if you want the all time, you can see that this is the all time, so the highest score that has ever been reached by a player in this tournament. And you can see that Morgan did pretty well. So we randomly select agents for tournaments based on the all time happiness leaderboard, and we randomly select them for you to play against. In terms of the economics behind it, this should ring a bell because it tackles not just demand and supply and markets and competition. It also tackles game theory. Here you are building an automation, but because there are a few agents in this economy that can affect the outcome by making their own decisions, this is the typical scenario where we are looking at strategic interaction. When I am making a decision regarding my simulated agents, how I want to program them, I need to think strategically about what the decision that Morgan has made. And in fact, if I want to make my bot future-proof, I should think even of building automations that can stand the test of time and be actually usable against other players in the future. This is typically what we do in game theory, where there are strategic interactions, so the optimal choice that I make depends on the choice made by other players, potentially. It is also like a moment where you can try to put together everything that you've learned in the game in one scenario. At this level of zoom, before I zoom back in, you can also check the wealth distribution in the economy. A very important topic nowadays is income inequality. And this view allows you to study in real time how the distribution of money changes. And you can easily track here who this particular agent belongs and the amount of money that is available to that faction. You can also have a look at the happiness. You can see already that there is some happiness inequality here. You can check activity to verify what these different factories are producing, the amount of inventories in the economy, the amount of GDP. You can have a look at these graphs in real time. You could perhaps speed up time and then just have a look at this view, see how the economy evolves over time. Very well. So this was, you can even have a look literally at things like, the change in wealth distribution, because again, we want to put more and more emphasis in the game over time on issues such as inequality, which are becoming really important in real life. They have always been important, but especially today, given the increase in inequality that we are observing. And you can see that production is happening now based on Morgan's ideas. Production is happening, and wealth is changing hands, and inventories are changing, and so on and so forth. Happiness has increased because of consumption. That's in a nutshell what happens in this particular scenario. There is nothing new in terms of the actions you need to take, because these are things that you have learned in previous scenarios, but the novelty is that you are actually playing against other students this time in a real tournament sense. So let's have a look at the leaderboard. As you can see in this session, Morgan's ideas are doing pretty well, and I'm not doing well at all because I haven't even started playing, so I better focus a little bit on the game. That's probably going to be another day now, day-night. There you go. So I'm going to now, you can speed time here. This is something that I mentioned previously in the other workshop, but just to let you know. So I'm going to just zoom back in at the micro level of the course. This is almost our way to, show the micro and the macro level of the course. And, as in this particular single player version of the game, I could literally go and purchase things that Morgan has produced, consume them. So like I'm doing now. Oops. I'm going to have to restart the game. 1 second. So I can, manually consume goods, manually pick them up, putting them on my consumption table, and all of these things. But I can also play this using automation, which I'm going to show you in a second. So there we go. I'm going to go back to showing the game now. There you have it. I'm going to reduce my big camera view. That's it. Alrighty. So jumping back into this scenario here. So I could do things manually, essentially trying to play against Morgan bots. And this is a little bit unfair if you think about it, because Morgan now is not playing the game synchronously with me in a multiplayer sense, because Morgan is not currently online. and they are not playing at the moment. So I'm playing against their bots, and I have kind of an advantage if I do things manually like I was showing you. However, I can also set up automations, for example, for my consumption agent, as we saw before, and I could, for example, tell my consumption agent, well, consume red mushroom. I could also be a little more sophisticated and say, consume the thing that has the maximum, that gives the maximum utility in this moment. And because it's recursive, if now it's pointing to blueberries, right, as the item that has the maximum utility. Go back to the previous workshop if this is in any way confusing. But of course, as I consume blueberries, they're gonna, because of decreasing marginal utility, they're gonna give me less and less happiness. Hence, at a certain point, I might actually switch to something else. This is just a recap of what you've seen with automation. But I could also just say, okay, you know what, consume something specific. This is not going to be a very smart automation, but it's an automation, and it's a legitimate automation nonetheless. So I'm going to move my camera a little bit so it's not in the way. You can do the same also for the entrepreneur. You could say, well, entrepreneur, produce something for me like mushrooms, and don't worry about it very much, and just produce one mushroom. Don't even think about consumption. This is actually, I think I made a mistake before, because that was the labor and leisure decision that I was setting up through my consumer. Apologies about that. This is actually the shopping list. I didn't even read the text. So for the consumers, I first set up my leisure labor decision, because know that up here you can see that I've got a consumer in my team, I've got an entrepreneur, and I have a worker as well. So I've set up through the consumer, I've set up both a shopping list and also the decision of my workers of how much time to spend doing leisure versus how much time spent working. So when the market closes, which is going to happen soon in 55 seconds, you are going to see that all these ideas are basically put into action, and I'm going to so market is going to start, people are going to start being hired, produce things, consume things, and so now I should be playing a little more actively than before. So if you want to zoom out at this point, you're going to be able to see what's going on in the economy, as I was mentioning. Now, this way of playing the game, as I said, it's a little bit unfair towards the bots created by other players, because you have the additional advantage of being able to control things manually through your agent here, what we call this manual agent here. But if you want a truly level field experience, there is a way to do it. And the way to do it is to click this button, Start Tournament Mode. This is something that I mentioned also in my previous workshop. You can start and press this button anytime you want, and that will automatically and seamlessly take you to tournament mode. There you go, I did it. So you can think of the other way I played the scenario as the manual way of playing the scenario, and this is the tournament mode, where in fact I have no control whatsoever over my agent. So I cannot control anyone anymore. They're just gonna follow some automation. I can see the market is gonna start soon, and things are gonna be produced very soon. At this point, we are really on a level field. My automation, the automation I created for my entrepreneur and my consumer and my worker, are now gonna play out for me, and they're gonna play strategically with respect to what Morgan is also doing. Strategically, I mean essentially through the market system, because by changing supply and demand through the automation that I've created, I am also changing the opportunities for making profit and production and consumption of Morgan. The classic type of interaction that you would expect in an economy. Let's see how well I'm doing relative to Morgan. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and open the leaderboard And my idea was not very smart. I think because I had created this rigid idea that's consuming something that might not even be sold in the market, I am ending, oh, actually, I managed to get some happiness at the end of the day, but you can see that Morgan is doing better than me. So one thing that I could consider is go back and try to understand by following the economy, why is Morgan getting more happiness than I do? Can I improve the automation of my bots in any way using the economic concepts? This really encapsulates, as I mentioned, all the phases and the stages that we have built up to this moment: the labor market, the product market, how to make the decisions in the economy about production and consumption, how happiness evolves, and allows you to understand the competition side of things and asks you to do both leisure and labor decision, consumption decision, production decision, all at once, competing with other students, and hence nudging you to trying to get to the optimal decision making to get as much happiness as possible. You can make points in the single player version of these scenarios and additional points in the tournament version of these scenarios. So I suggest you give it a go. This is everything I had for today. I have looked at a couple of extra scenarios, a few extra scenarios that we have added since the practice period. I hope everyone is enjoying the game. It doesn't look like I have a lot of questions in the chat, which is a really good sign because it means that things have been very clear. If the game wouldn't be clear in the past when it wasn't for some reason as clear to students, I would get a lot of questions. This is a great sign for me that things are going well, but do not hesitate to contact us through your lecturer or through the support channel if you have any questions about any of this. I think this will be my last workshop, so I want to say to everybody, thank you very much for participating in the assessment. We really appreciate all the positive feedback that we have received in our email. Thanks a lot for the support. Thanks to the lecturers at UQ and UNSW. Best wishes from the Play Economics team. We understand that these are difficult times for a lot of people. Hence, we just wish you the best. And if there is anything we can do to help you with any aspects, or any of the aspects of this assessment, please let us know. In the meantime, a big goodbye and a big hug from the Play Economics team. Have a great day, have a great term or semester or hexamester that you're doing. Good luck with your exam, and I hope to cross paths with you and see you very soon. Bye bye and take care. Bye bye. Thank you.